Israel's grubby fingerprints are all over the genocide in Sudan, are all over the genocide in Sudan, are all over the genocide in Sudan. Hello, it's your friend CJ Werleman, and in this episode we reveal how Israel is secretly calling the shots in Sudan, where its ally, the United Arab Emirates, is committing genocide. But first, please remember to like and subscribe to our show. Now let's get into it. Wherever Muslims, Arabs or Africans are being raped, killed and displaced, you'll inevitably find Israel holding a gun or carrying a shovel, while standing shoulder to shoulder with its Zionist-coddling Arab ally, the United Arab Emirates. The pair have become inseparable blood brothers since the Arab Spring of 2011, drawn together by a shared fear and hatred of Palestine, the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran. You see, Abu Dhabi was not only the first Arab capital to recognize the state of Israel, but also it served as an active partner in the genocide of Gaza. As we reported several months ago here, the Emirati regime hosted exclusive entertainment programs for Israeli soldiers who were directly responsible for brutal massacres and bloody crimes against Palestinian civilians. Dubai is where Israeli murderers escaped and recharged their batteries in preparation for another round of mass slaughter in Gaza. Sadly, the Palestinian territories isn't the only place where genocide is being carried out with direct Israeli and Emirati cooperation. There's also Sudan, where more than 160,000 civilians have been killed by Israeli and Emirati-backed forces in the African country during the past 2 years. But the Sudanese are not the victims of a civil war here. They are victims of a proxy war. On one side, you have the Sudanese people and their government forces. But on the other side, you have the Israeli and Emirati-backed Rapid Support Forces, better known by their three-letter acronym, the RSF militias, which does not recruit its fighters from Sudan, but instead, using Israeli and Emirati money, it buys mercenaries from Chad, South Africa, Libya, Colombia, and El Salvador. These Zionist Emirati-funded mercenaries are wiping out entire towns and villages in Sudan by setting property and people on fire, executing civilians in broad daylight, and raping women in front of their families. You don't need to understand their language to comprehend their suffering.
والله تعبنا جعانين امي ماتت ما كان في دواء وابوي راح يدور اكل وما
These Zionist Emirati-funded mercenaries are wiping out entire towns and villages in Sudan by setting property and people on fire, executing civilians in broad daylight, and raping women in front of their families.
Netanyahu is the longest-sitting prime minister in Israeli history. If you follow it, as I do, and you're not obliged to, that's not your niche. Every few years, they report, Netanyahu's going, Netanyahu's going, Netanyahu's out, Netanyahu's finished. No, he's not. And you know why? Because he's an obnoxious, narcissistic Jewish supremacist. And that's Israeli society. Obnoxious, narcissistic, Jewish supremacist. When they see him, they see themselves. So there may be quarrels on this policy issue and that policy issue, but at the end of the day, they keep voting for him. And they vote for him because Netanyahu is not just the face of, he's the reality of Israeli society.
Yeah.
When they try so hard, the people who are critical of Israel, people like Bernie Sanders, who's been not bad in recent years, he has his limits, but he's been okay. He always tries to laser beam Netanyahu. That's not true. The problem is not Netanyahu. The problem is the whole of Israeli society. If you look at the polls, half of Israeli Jews believe Israel should commit a genocide in Gaza. That's what the polls show. About 70 to 75% in polls say there are no innocents in Gaza. No innocents.
And there's nothing but children.
Yeah, no innocents in Gaza, half the population being Jewish.
We're gonna make history. We're gonna change how everything is gonna look, and we're gonna do it right.
From the Jordan River to the Middle East, that's all ours. It was promised to us. There's no Palestinian nation. No one wants them, so why we? Because we are good. We finished to be good 3 weeks ago.
I think the bombing is good. I think they should have a lot more of the bombing, the bombarding. I think we can do a lot more inside of Gaza. It's a fight between the good and the bad, the good and the evil.
The only innocent people that are in Gaza now are the 229 hostages that were taken. Once they will go back to Israel, we will bomb Shifa Hospital, all the hospitals, all the towns.
The former Israeli, or the current Israeli opposition leader, he said that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, they kill children as a hobby. As a hobby.
Yeah, I've seen some videos of like how proud they are when they kill a child, and it's really dark. But also, I will say, you can see psychological conditioning, as in their viewpoints on the Palestinians, you can tell, is being nurtured from the time that they're a child. And I ran into somebody who left Israel, moved to Tennessee recently, and I ran into him at a farmer's market, and he said, I absolutely love you, and I want you to know that we learn this stuff from the time we are children.
I totally agree with that.
He said, so he left, and he said, from the time we are children, we learn to hate. So he kind of broke a psychological barrier to get there, obviously, as an Israeli. But you are correct. I mean, and that's why psychology really is the name of the game. When you're talking about religious fanaticism or any other fanaticism, I want to say also, there is an element of psychology, and that is why in my capacity now, that's actually gotten a lot of trouble talking about the history of Sigmund Freud. But if you want to really speak about what is happening with psychology, propaganda, PR, he's the father of all of that. And going back and tracing those roots, it's very scary. I mean, these were really deeply dark people.
Israel's deepening ties to the Emirati regime and the RSF militias in Sudan helped the Zionist state secure maritime routes, monitor regional rivals, and expand its intelligence footprint across Africa. We will reveal the full scope and scale of Israel's role in Sudan's nightmare in a moment, but let's start by revisiting an article I wrote 5 years ago, whereby I explained how the UAE has recruited more than 30,000 mercenaries and dozens of private armies to carry out high-profile assassinations in Sudan, Yemen, Somalia, and Libya, with the aim of controlling and dominating the Red Sea and the Horn of Africa.
In the long term, the UAE's main goal in the Red Sea and Horn of Africa is leverage. By building military installations and controlling many of the region's strategic ports, the state is positioning itself to control military and trade flows in an area which is expected to undergo rapid economic growth in the next century. A sensible investment perhaps on the part of the Gulf state, which is currently heavily reliant on its vast but limited oil wealth. Moreover, the UAE's military and commercial moves in the Red Sea come amid its wider attempts to influence East Africa for its own security. With 90% of the state's food supply imported, Emirati-based companies have been active in buying up agricultural land in East African states to protect the country from volatile commodity prices. If successful in building leverage, the UAE could be securing its own economic future in a world looking to move away from fossil fuels for environmental and security reasons.
Growing diplomatic isolation is why the Israeli economy has crashed into a heap as credible forecasts point to an approaching economic Armageddon on Israel's horizon. It also knows that global sanctions are inevitable as the world gains more clarity about Israel's total destruction and subjugation of Palestine, which is why the Jewish state sees Sudan and other parts of Africa as an opportunity to pillage and plunder for the sake of its own survival. Both Israel and the UAE are arming a foreign-led coup against the Sudanese government, so together they can control the country's strategic maritime ports in the Red Sea, along with its rich agricultural sector and vast amounts of gold. And we are talking about a heck of a lot of gold. Enough gold to make the UAE one of the world's top gold exporters, despite not owning a single gold mine itself. A reality that hasn't stopped the Emirati regime from smuggling more than 400 tons of gold from Africa into Dubai and Abu Dhabi, where this stolen loot was sold for more than $40 billion in 2022 alone. A windfall that has grown substantially greater thanks to the Emirati Zionist-backed genocide taking place in Sudan at this very moment. The fruits of this violence put on display in a typical gold store in the Emirati capital. Every ounce of this treasure you see was stolen from Sudan and other African nations, making this the gold equivalent of the blood diamond trade.
Time you see gold in Dubai, don't ask how much it costs, ask how many lives it costs, because the truth is Dubai only shines because Africa bleeds. Behind every single necklace, behind every luxury hotel, behind every single bracelet. Dubai has turned into a billionaire's playground, built on what Africa has lost. Because 95% of unregulated gold from Africa goes straight to Dubai, not Switzerland, not the United States, it goes straight to Dubai. Dubai is the #1 destination with no mines of its own, no minerals of its own, no resources of its own, yet they have built this whole luxury landscape based on the lives of Africans that have been lost.
The blood spilled from the Zionist Emirati colonial conquest of Sudan can now be seen from outer space. This is the direct dirty work of the RSF militias, who laid siege to the city of Al-Fashir, where 260,000 residents have been denied all food and medical supplies for the past 500 days, with the aim of forcing starving civilians to flee into the arms of their attackers.
Some are asked what their ethnicity is, and they leave them. Others say their ethnicity, and they kill them. They took all of our belongings as we left. My wife and I got to Gurney, and we were held with 400 families. They chose people and executed them in front of us. They kill them in front of you and say, bury your brother, and we just have to pour soil on them.
Women's bodies have been turned into crime scenes in Sudan as those fleeing Al-Fashir recount experiences of rape, violence and famine. That's according to the United Nations Agency for Women on Tuesday.
Women's bodies, ladies and gentlemen, have just become a crime scene in Sudan. There are no safe spaces that are left. Nowhere for women to gather safely, to seek protection, or even access even the most basic psychosocial care.
A man who escaped the last functioning hospital in the Sudanese city of Al-Fashir, where RSF mercenaries massacred an entire maternity ward, describes his country's sense of grief and loss.
Right now, I feel extremely hopeless. I've lost my colleagues, the people whose faces I used to see smiling. There is no happiness anymore. It feels as if you've lost a big part of your body or your soul. I do not see any hope of returning to Al-Fashir. After everything that happened and everything I saw, even if there was a small hope, I remember what happened in front of me.
A man who escaped the last functioning hospital in the Sudanese city of Al-Fashir, where RSF mercenaries massacred an entire maternity ward.
The worst single mass killing of Palestinians in the Israel-Gaza war so far. Hundreds are dead after a blast at a hospital. Chaos and horror at the scene. Much of the building has been destroyed. A panic to treat the injured. Thousands of people were sheltering at the hospital, having fled Israel's bombing campaign targeting Hamas. They thought they were safe. Now Gazans once again count the cost of this war.
Israel denies it was responsible, blaming Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Jordan, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia condemn what they say was an Israeli attack.
A man who escaped the last functioning hospital in the Sudanese city of Al-Fashir, where RSF mercenaries massacred an entire maternity ward.
In terms of the warnings that you got, could you tell us what form of warnings? Were they written warnings, telephone calls, and how many of them were there ahead of this?
We have, since the decision being made about evacuation of North Gaza to the south of Gaza, we have received 3 warnings. So beginning, I think, Saturday, Sunday, and so these 3 were mainly by telephone. will phone the administration, telling them as much as they did with all, because they have the phone numbers of all the directors of the hospital, so they can they either send message or whatever means they have to notify. So these are the 3 warnings that they were.
So you received, not only do you receive 3 warnings after the first strike to your church, saying that the hospital would be bombed. What did it say? What did the warning say?
Warning that the hospital will be ballistic here. The warnings, they were to evacuate the hospital.
To evacuate the hospital?
Yes, that was the warning.
But the warning was that otherwise, sorry to be clarified, that was implicit in that was the idea that the hospital would be bombed because you had to evacuate it. They said you would evacuate the hospital.
The connection you make, what happened on the facts on the ground? 3 days before the actual bombing, the hospital was hit in the 2 floors that I mentioned, and then we continued to receive the notices to evacuate, and then the hospital was struck last night. So these are the facts on the ground that actually happened.
Given that the facts, as you have set them out to us here in this room, the Israeli denies that they are involved in the bombing and that it was an Israeli missile. We must accept that they are worthless, they are baseless, those Israeli denials, given they sent you 3 warnings to evacuate the hospital. Do you agree with that analysis?
People can analyze what they want to analyze. Again, from our point of view, we as a church, we continue to say that the place, the hospital itself is a sanctuary for people, and what happened there is a crime. We are not, again, military people to decide, or we are not journalists to analyze. We are not politicians to decide. What we are saying here is that, what has happened in the hospital is a crime, is a massacre.
These mass killings have suddenly snapped the world's attention on Sudan, as human rights groups gather evidence of the respective roles played by the Emirati and Israeli governments in this ongoing genocide. These regimes are now working feverishly hard to shake the world off their respective backs, as Emirati influencers and official Israeli government social media accounts spread disinformation and lies on social media platforms, where they compare the Sudanese army to ISIS and Hamas, while falsely tying the Sudanese people to the Muslim Brotherhood. Prominent Zionist forces in the West are also trying to build sympathy for the RSF by falsely framing the conflict as a religious war between Muslims and Christians. An easily provable lie, given more than 90% of Sudan's population is Muslim, and given an overwhelming majority of RSF fighters are not even from Sudan. What's irrefutably true, and more than a coincidence however, is how RSF militias have adopted Israel's template for genocide.
Has devised a template to justify exterminatory wars against civilians. We know that the RSF has started to use very similar language and logics to justify attacks. Discourses such as human shields, collateral damage, militarization of civilian objects on the basis of the use by Palestinian armed groups were already composing a framework in which it appeared that everyone in the world, whenever a Palestinian civilian was killed, had to presume that Palestinian civilians, even in the dozens, were killed lawfully.
Israel's grubby fingerprints are all over the genocide in Sudan. Its deepening ties to the Emirati regime and RSF militias helps Israel secure maritime routes, monitor regional rivals such as Iran and China, expand its intelligence footprint across Africa, and steal Sudan's natural resources. An investigation by the NGO Sudan Transparency shows how Israel has been obsessed with the African country since the 1970s. The Jewish state has bombed Sudan and attacked the Sudanese government for years, having long accused it of trafficking weapons to Egypt and the Palestinian resistance in the Gaza Strip.
It is a fact, and one has to, in my opinion, face it because it's having real consequences. There's a Jewish supremacist billionaire class which is exerting a huge amount of power and muscle up front and behind the scenes.
Christian influencers. Okay. You said, you talked about the woke right. And he said, I call it the woke Reich. That's a brilliant observation. The woke Reich, because these people, you know, they're not any different from the woke left. I mean, they're insane. They're loonies. But they're actually meeting on some of the things. And what we have to do is we have to secure that part of the base of our support in the United States. That is being challenged systematically. A lot of this is done with money. Money of NGOs, vast. Money of governments, vaster. Okay? We have to fight back. How do we fight back? Our influencers. I think you should also talk to them if you have a chance. To that community, they're very important. And secondly, we're going to have to use the tools of battle. You know, the weapons change over time. You can't fight today with swords. That doesn't work very well. Okay, and you can't fight with cavalry. That doesn't work very well. And you have these new things, you know, like drones, things like that. I won't get into that. But we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are in social media. And the most important purchase that is going on right now is TikTok. TikTok, number one. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And the other one, what's the other one that's most important? X. X. Exactly. Very good. And, you know, so we have to talk to Elon. He's not an enemy. He's a friend. We should talk to him. Now, if we can get those two things, we get a lot. And I could go on other things, but that's not the point right now. We have to fight the fight, okay? To give direction to the Jewish people and give direction to our non-Jewish friends or those who could be our Jewish our friends. Are we going to succeed with everyone? No. Will there be a strong counterpoint? Yes.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was black. Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10.